Hello and welcome to another episode of the 905er Roundup with me, Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And this week we're welcoming back friend of the podcast, Laura Steiner, who is a senior reporter with the Milton Reporter. And who we spoke to, I don't know, about 6 months ago, 9 months, more than that, I can't remember. But anyway, very, very glad to have you back on to the podcast for a second time.
It's great to be back. I enjoyed the experience the first time. Had fun. I mean,
we'll try not to ruin it this time.
Yeah. So
that sounds like a motto if I've ever heard one. Had fun the first time.
It's like more of my being awkward, really.
So we've got a few stories which certainly touch on Milton and the Halton region, and an issue later on in the podcast which touches on the whole 905. But let's kick off with the story that seems to be getting a lot of interest from the public, which is on Saturday morning, I believe it was, the region of Halton had a sort of emergency vote on whether to keep their mask mandates in place or to fall in line with the province and withdraw the mask mandates for Halton. There's now been a vote today in Burlington. I know, I'm not sure about the other councils, to also withdraw their mask mandates, because each level of government has that ability. And in the whole of Halton, and I also know in Burlington today, there was only one councillor to vote to keep mask mandates any longer, which was Councillor Rory Nissan, who's the Ward 3 councillor in Burlington. Apart from him, it was completely unanimous. I mean, it wasn't unanimous, but it was unanimous but one, which is pretty one-sided. And it certainly struck me that was surprising, given that I don't see public opinion being so one-sided on this issue, not remotely this one-sided. I don't know, Laura, what do you think's going on here? Do you think is it just such an obvious thing that they're all in complete agreement, or what's going on?
I'm not sure, because I watched a lot of the meeting online and I was tweeting a little bit about it, and it surprised me because it wasn't really in line with a lot of what people were thinking. There's a lot of angst around this, and there's a lot of suddenly losing almost every safeguard we have just to return to normal. And there also didn't seem to be a lot of data behind it. You list for things like case counts, you list, I don't know, in Milton, I think it was, I want to say 13 today. But I've also heard
a tweet earlier. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, I've also heard that I was been talking to my own doctor just yesterday, and they said that some of those home tests aren't sensitive enough to pick up a lot of the Omicron strains. So there might be a lot that's going uncounted here. And I just wonder if there might have been an in-between step before making the leap. It has to happen at some point, but it's kind of, it's a hard thing to assess, but at some point you gotta make it in line with data for the time being, and then maybe slowly rolling it back.
Well, I think what you're touching upon there, Laura, is like what the general mood is in the public. Any I don't want to say I'm in touch with all the parent groups, but I mean, when you have kids in elementary school like I do, you're asking every parent, like, what are you doing? What do you feel comfortable with? What's your kid going to do, and all this. And there's definitely a sense of we're just diving into the deep end, and we're going to see hopefully the pool's full kind of feeling in the public, which is surprising to come back to the Halton region. and to see this eagerness of, okay, we can pass it on, we can scrub this off. And then we were talking just before you logged on here. Hamilton had a similar debate where the minority, I believe you said, Roland, there were 2 councillors who voted in favor of keeping the mandates.
Yeah, I mean, it was slightly different in that the Mayor Eisenberger was actually quite outspoken that this was wrong and this shouldn't be happening, and then voted to do it anyway. He was basically, his opinion, and this may be behind a lot of what's happened in Halton too. His view was that, well, the municipalities have been thrown under the bus here. If we do something different, we're opening up every restaurant, every bar, every business to defending, trying to defend something that everybody thinks has been withdrawn already. So I do take that.
But I guess what I look at this as this. I have multiple thoughts on this, so bear with me for a second here. If you look back at the start of the pandemic, when we first brought in mask mandates, like way back March or April of 2020, the thought was, the province should implement this a mask mandate across the entire province, right? So no matter where, if you're in Thunder Bay or in Hamilton, in Milton, or Durham, it did not matter. You all got the same mask mandates. And Ford said, no, I'm going to pass this on to each individual region and municipality. And that's why we now had this mass rush of these mass overnight meetings to say, okay, let's lift it up. I do think I think it's at the local level. There's a bit of fear on the part of our elected officials. They don't want to wear that. They don't want to. They don't want to be the ones to say, no, we have to be the bearer of bad news. We think the government, the provincial government, is wrong on this. And that's a bit of it is the cowardliness of the Doug Ford government and passing the buck onto the region and municipalities. Is that the region and municipalities ultimately are the ones who have to make that decision. And they're sitting there going, well, crap, we're 20 people are at a table, and if every other region and municipality in Ontario says, yeah, we're lifting the mandates, why do we get to be the ones? And it's like that. It is that peer pressure mentality. That's what we have. It's like they don't want to be the one region out of the rest of the province, despite the fact that there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, can we just postpone lifting the mandates until mid-April maybe, or maybe the May 2-4 weekend, and see if the numbers meet it then? Can we just postpone it a couple of weeks? I think it comes down to it's a decision that really a regional government or a municipal government should not be making in a global pandemic.
Yeah, Laura, do you want to jump in there?
Sorry, I was rambling there, Laura.
You could really, to be perfectly honest, you could see, you could look at a lot of different decisions on the handling of the pandemic and cry and yell about the Ford government's cowardice, because I think it's there. We just got to look for it. All we have to do is look for it. But that being said, on the masks, it really, I think we touched on this as well earlier before we started recording it, that you can't dismiss the politics of it. You cannot dismiss the idea that this is a double election year, and the first one comes up in less than 3 months, and the next one comes up in October, and nobody wants to be wearing, and nobody wants to wear this much into the summer.
It's interesting. I mean, just to go over the three. So if we take the whole of Halton and the whole of Hamilton, there's the three councillors. Those councillors are quite interesting. So Rory Nissan he first elected in 2018. I don't think I'm speaking out of quite likely. I don't know. I have to say, but I mean, he's certainly a not an unambitious councillor. I don't think he's someone who sees Ward Street councillor as his final job in politics. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. And the two people in Hamilton are the two downtown councillors who are out of step with the rest of Hamilton Council on an awful lot of things. Narendra Nan and I just blanked on her name. My councillor for Ward 2, whose name will come back.
Wilson.
Maureen Wilson. Thank you.
There we go.
I can forget my own name, so please, Councillor Wilson, if you're listening, don't take offence. It's not personal. All three of those councillors, I would say, they're not. These are not shrinking violets. They're people with ambitions, I would say. Which is not to suggest that there's any ulterior motive on their side, just that they maybe are more willing to stand out from the crowd on this issue for entirely legitimate, fair, and honourable reasons. It's taking I guess whichever way you look at it, it's taking a risk. So I'm going to read out a tweet from Rob McIsaac. So Rob McIsaac, for anybody listening, is the president and CEO of Hamilton Health Sciences. So, the head healthcare dude in Hamilton. This is what he tweeted today. Recent modeling shows we will likely see another spike in COVID-19 hospitalizations and ICU admissions in the coming weeks. Together, we can lessen the severity of any spike. Now, he's obviously being diplomatic here. He's not talking about masks, but he's saying another spike is on the way. That flies in the face of statements virtually at the same time from, say, the mayor of Burlington, saying, all the evidence shows that, the numbers are going down and this is the right time and blah, blah, blah. I can't see.
Here's the thing, Roland, that you've touched upon a trend that I'm noticing on social media, and that's this. Every politician is tweeting out or sending out a message. Numbers are going down. We've passed the Omicron wave. We've passed the worst of it. We can start putting COVID in the rearview mirror. If you look at any doctor, you have Rob McIsaac in charge of Hamilton Health Sciences, Dr. Jennifer Kwan on Twitter, Dr. David Feisman, Ryan Imgren is another guy who provides data. All of them are saying the data is pointing to another wave coming at us. We've had on this podcast Todd Coleman, who's an epidemiologist at Laurier, who has said, we know another wave is coming. We don't know when, and we don't know how severe, but another wave is going to hit us. That is a guarantee as long as borders are open and the vast majority of people are unvaccinated. It's just going to happen. And I think that's what it comes down to, is that people know this. They know this in their bones. We if you remember, we were supposed to have all these mandates lifted in January. We were supposed to having this debate in January, and then Omicron hit, and all of a sudden it's like, nope, we have to go back into lockdown mode and what have you. And I guess it comes down to is this government doesn't have a great track record. I always say, like, when has this government not even just COVID, when have they ever laid out a plan and executed it and they said it worked out exactly how we said, or we got the end result of how we said we've promised A and we got it? No, I mean, they just have a track record of failure, honestly. So they don't instill a lot of public confidence on this decision. And we have the people who all they do is provide data, and they've been right all along. All the scientists and epidemiologists have been right when they say another wave is coming. The wave hits us, and each wave has hit us worse and worse and worse. So to say all of a sudden now, arbitrarily, seemingly, hey, it's good, people, we beat COVID. The politicians seem to be getting this wrong, in my opinion.
I can. And I don't know if you agree with this, Laura, but it's like you can make a case for lifting mandates because just because you've had them long enough, or the kind of anti-masker argument, or you can make the case. But the case you can't make is that the statistics are any different now from any other point over the last 2 years. If anything, they're worse. So it's like, what is the logic that says now is the right moment, other than there's an election in June?
Yeah. The other thing is, and I think a lot of epidemiologists have said this, is if you're going to lower those mandates, if you're going to eliminate them, you got to increase testing, right? And I don't, just a bit about my personal situation. I've had to take COVID tests a few times within the last week, and one of them I went up to a clinic to get, and it was negative, thankfully, but they said they can't get a PCR. I couldn't get a PCR test because I didn't meet the criteria for one. So
right. That's the other thing about this, that there seems to be an effort to cover up the data.
Yeah, it's got to be a bit of give and take. You're taking the masks, but maybe you open, I don't know, a couple of 12-hour testing clinics. Like,
I mean, I've really tried not to jump to conclusions on this, and I've really tried not to just say this is outrageous, this is wrong, this is ridiculous. Partly because I feel like I almost say that too much, and it gets boring.
Yeah.
But it's like, wow, I can't see the logic for this coming from any direction, and yet every politician, every level of government is, barring three, is in agreement that this is the right thing to do.
Like
I don't get it.
Like I said, I'm being really cynical here, and I'm saying these guys are running for re-election and nobody wants to wear it. It's a provincial.
I don't think you're being cynical. I don't think you're being cynical, Laura. Though I think you're nailing this right on the
calling it out.
This right in the head.
Like it's just,
yeah.
Nobody wants
but they
to
could
wear
equally.
it.
They could. I mean, like a big spike between now and June, or a big spike between June and October. They could wear that too. It's like you. Sorry, I was going to swear there. Well, I do anyway. You assholes took away the mask mandates. What the hell were you thinking? I mean, it could go the other way.
This is something that they could be coming back, and they could be regretting this come next month if the trends continue as the epidemiologists are telling us. By mid-April, we could be sitting there, telling them, like, somebody do something, and everybody's just being afraid of. But I don't want a truck convoy coming through my downtown. Essentially, is what I think is going on here. They don't want to see the the flags and what have you come out, and I think that plays a factor. I would love to have somebody who sat around the table on and pick their brains with this, like, because I get a sense that fear is running this more than more than science and more than logic. I think there's a sense of fear of I don't want a truck convoy coming through my downtown in an election year. I don't want to see what happened in Ottawa happen to me here.
And I think maybe there's more honesty in Mayor Eisenberger's position than in some of the Halton mayor's position, and that he's like, we can't go against the province because that risks the whole us becoming a target of the whack jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes every business owner in Hamilton or every business owner in Halton a target of the whack jobs if they kick up stink about a mask, which that's I do appreciate, particularly when you're talking about business owners. But I mean, it's the sudden everything is fine, and all the people who are especially vulnerable, who have compromised immune systems, the elderly, there's still plenty of people, children who are not vaccinated because I don't know if everybody's open to vaccination now, but we still haven't got all the children done. It's like we forgot. Oh no, that's fine now. Don't worry about them anymore. All those people that we talked about for 2 years solid, we don't need to talk about them anymore because they're going to be fine. And that just seems incredibly insulting. Anyway, maybe we should take a quick break there, and then we will come back after the break with with more from the 905 podcast.
Sure.
So welcome back to part 2, and I thought we'd take a quick look at Milton because Laura's here and she knows a lot more about Milton than Joel and I do. With the best will
I
in
know
the
how to
world.
spell it.
And I mean, are there any rumors coming out of Milton about what might happen at the provincial election there? And are there any possible candidates thinking of running against the immortal Gord Krantz?
I think he'll be pleased to be called that, but that's besides the point. Provincially, I think I've talked about her before. For the Liberals, is Ward 4 Municipal Councillor Samira Ali has the Liberal ticket, and my sense is still it's going to be a pretty messy race because there's bad blood on both sides. She helped out on another councillor, Mike Cluett. It's a nomination campaign, and it was it was dirty. It was on the dirtier side. There were allegations of fraud and all that stuff. And now she's suddenly running for the provincial Liberals. So
was Mike Cluett running for the Liberals?
Mike Cluett ran for the Progressive Conservatives against Parham Gill for the nomination, and
he lost, and it was one of the that was one of the Patrick Brown era nominations.
That was one of the Patrick Brown era nominations, and it was a little. I would describe it as scripted.
There were a lot of those, to
be honest.
Yeah,
but yeah, so there were.
Okay, so it's interesting that she's now running for she's actually got the nomination already, though.
She has, yes. And she's very personable. She's very responsive to constituents and all that. She's smart and a good communicator. So she's a lot of good stuff you'd want in an MPP. But I think
does she have a chance of winning?
I think she has a pretty good chance of winning. She's pretty well known in the community. But again, there's this whole. I think it stands to be a pretty personal race, is what I would say. But we'll see. It hasn't really officially kicked off yet. But
well, that's I have a suspicion that like this general provincial election is going to be. I'm not getting a sense of like a lot of excitement around it. Like there's a kind of more of a dread, if you will, in the general. It
was the same way with the federal election.
Like
it's like,
well, the federal election nobody
wanted
for,
it.
Right? Like,
nobody
we didn't know it was
this
coming.
One, it's like,
but
scheduled, so we got to do
this
it.
is like that, like that disaster that we're approaching. We're like, we don't want to deal with it, but we know we have to. Because I think there's an appetite for change. People are kind of fed up with the Doug Ford government in terms of its handling of like it's just been kind of a sense of disappointment on the whole. Like I don't know of any clear victories for the Ford government that they can hold over their head and say, yeah, this is ours. We're gonna wear this with pride. Yet the choices for an alternative aren't really endearing to a lot of people, is what I'm getting from the general public. Is that the sense in Milton? Like, am I reading the room right here?
You've got a good point, and the sense that I get certainly in watching Minute or Parham Gill is that he's not, and just different things I've heard around about him is he's not really clicking with the electorate. And I think that's where a Councillor Ali might have, or I don't know what to call her, whether she's the Liberal candidate, will have some room to kind of maneuver a little bit in there.
Okay.
But I've also met, for the record,
you.
I've also met Stephen Del Duca a few times, and I'm still a little bit back and forth about him. I find he might improve a little bit on subsequent meetings, and I I get the feeling he's trying to build some kind of consensus. But the question is, how can he either use that, or how can he kind of separate himself from the Wynne government and the McGuinty government?
Right.
A large portion of that time he was sitting in the front benches for that. And it's gonna it's gonna just be like hitting, just taking a shot on an empty net for Doug Ford. And it's because, to pin stuff on him from that era.
Here's a question though. So they have if you take a step out of Milton and maybe out of Halton, and you look at the 905 as a whole, and I'm going to say, aside from Stephen Del Duca, and I'll take away Andrew Horvath, can you tell me, I'm trying to think of, is there any real star candidates of any party in the 905? I'm trying to think of Mississauga and Peel candidates there coming westward, and maybe even just down around to St. Catharines, Niagara Falls region. And I'm trying to think of if there are any stars that people go, oh wow, that's a real standout. That party got a win on that candidate running for them in that seat. I'm kind of drawing a blank.
It's a lot of.
Isn't that a problem in itself?
Yeah, that's probably a problem in itself. I haven't heard anything of what the NDP plan to do here, and you don't necessarily do.
Yeah, well, this is the thing with the NDP, and I'm always cognizant of trying to be, given my own background, which was in a particular party, I'm always cognizant of trying to treat everybody equally. But traditionally the NDP thing is, because they're running in third place, that a lot of their candidates get kind of nominated last minute. And there's a little bit of, who can we find? I mean, not in cities like Hamilton, obviously, not in Windsor, not in central Toronto, but in many places in 905, which they have to win if they're ever going to form the government. It's kind of like, okay, who wants to run this time out of our membership of 15 people? Okay, you'll do. Now, it's not always the case, and I don't want people to think I'm completely generalizing then, but it certainly has happened both federally and provincially numerous times. And all parties do it to an extent. It's just that the NDP traditionally do it more because they are coming from the weaker position to start with. It doesn't look like, if you're talking about the NDP jumping from official opposition to government, which absolutely has to be their objective. We've just talked about the Liberals for the last 10 minutes, and B, they need to have those candidates in place a year ahead, year and a half ahead, so they can, those guys. Now, in Burlington, we have that. You can follow the guy's Twitter account, and he's out knocking doors, as is the Liberal candidate. The Conservative candidate has only just been nominated. I'm sure she'll be doing the same thing. But in other places, we're not kind of seeing that. I certainly know that when you look at the proposed Liberal caucus, there are a very few MPPs who are seeking to come back. There's maybe there are the MPPs who held on to their seats. There's 7 or 8 of them, and there are a handful of people who are seeking re-election who lost their seats last time. But other than that, it's all new faces, which also, they can cut both ways. It can be good things, and there's a fresh faces and all that, or it can be, why would we
vote for these who's people? That?
Yeah, that's the risk you run. And obviously picking a councillor is a classic thing that parties seeking to win a seat from an incumbent do. So Milton, that's kind of the playbook that you get in Milton. That hasn't happened in Burlington. Oakville, North Burlington, I don't know, I have to say. Well, it'll be interesting to see. I have no idea how this election is going to go. But I guess that brings us to our next point, really, which is today the federal Liberal government and the Prime Minister and Jagmeet Singh of the NDP announced that they have made an agreement for a confidence and supply agreement to keep the government in office for the full term of this parliament. And we're not meant to be a federal politics podcast, but we are a 905 one. And immediately after this announcement came out, there were a whole lot of tweets, not all from journalists, many from ordinary people, as they say, saying, "Come on, Andrea, come on, Stephen, let's do this in Ontario too." Laura, let's start with you. A, do you think that would be a good idea? B, do you think it will actually happen? Do you think this is something that those parties should be looking at ahead of an election or possibly after an election, depending what the result is? I guess there's a whole bunch of possibilities.
There's a whole lot of variables, but if you were looking at it before the election, I think it would have to be a very well thought out strategy on behalf of the two parties. The two parties would have to sort of meet in the middle, so to speak, and I think they would have to go riding by riding and pick who has the strongest candidate. I think to go in, like using, because we were just talking about it, Milton as an example. I'd imagine in Milton it would be Councillor Ali that would go, and the NDP would then pick another riding and would go in another riding. And I think that's the way if you were going before. But as it, I don't know how it would work, who would be premier, but well,
I mean, someone said on.
It would almost have to be Stephen Del Duca because he would be more palatable to more people. And
there's
I'll
no
be honest,
way on earth that Andrea Horwath or the NDP would ever go for that ahead of an election.
And I'll be honest, just a quick note. I'll be honest I think Andrea Horwath might be a little past it because I think she's got sort of the one note, the anger side of it. And the idea as an opposition leader is you have to be angry at what the government does. Yes. But you also should be able to propose what your party would do in its place. Right. And it's that part that they're kind of falling down on for me. But
I don't think we need, I was just going to look at like what the federal agreement is. I mean, it appears to be just that. It's just an agreement. It's just saying, well, okay, we won't vote you out of office on any confidence motion as long as you provide legislation on these priorities. And I was just looking at them, and like they're pretty. It's pretty much a campaign text. Like there's not actually any bills that they're like you have to vote these in. It's like a better healthcare system. They want to bring in a pharmacare plan and a national dental plan, which is kind of like, yeah, that's okay. You've been saying that for years. Make life more affordable. So housing benefits. Okay, yeah, you've been doing that for years. Climate crisis. Yeah, nothing like none of that stuff is like really concrete. Like we want to see this bill put in. So I look at this and say, I don't see any reason why Del Duca and Horwath cannot come out and say, we're going to agree on these basic general principles. As long as we see movement towards, movement on whatever, building social housing, more socialized housing, for example, or we're going to see a promise to hire back so many nurses and teachers over the next 4 years. A big general, like we don't need to get into the nitty gritty bill, the how you're going to do it. That comes later, but just like a general high profile, we want to do this. You could get away with it. And I think if they did that right now, they came out like next week and said it, it would help them out beneficially because it would alleviate a lot of the tension that's in the electorate right now. Like we said before, there's a lot of people who say, I don't like my options. And people are tired of playing this all or nothing roulette spin on who do I get as my MPP. If you free that up, you say, well, no, what I feel more confident.
Who's going to screw it up the least? Excuse my language.
Well, kind of. And you say, okay, but like right now, the polls don't show that anybody's really loving any of the parties. People are saying, well, they'll vote for Doug Ford because, well, shit, he's the incumbent. All right. And the incumbent usually wins. But I don't get the sense that people are very satisfied with that choice. So, okay, some people might park their vote with the Liberals because that's what they normally do. Some people would park it with the NDP because that's what they do. My point being is at the end of the day, right now it looks like there might be a minority government regardless. People would be uncomfortable with that. They say, fine then, Liberals, NDP, team up and just get stuff done. Move the province forward. And then you take away, and then here's the thing: you take away the criticism that right now the Conservatives are leveling at the federal party. The federal Conservatives are leveling, saying nobody voted for this. Like this wasn't on the agreement in the last federal election. All this, it's a malarkey, I know, but it's really hard for them to say that. It's like, no, we did talk about it. We're going to do politics differently. And that's why I think you send people, like, people don't need the details. They just want to say, yeah, we're open to it. We're going to cooperate.
I mean, I guess my take on that is, in theory, I would totally support that kind of thing. In practice, it's not going to happen before the election. Like, there is no way that Andrea Horwath or the NDP are going to give up their chance at what they believe is a chance to convert opposition into government. I don't think they have a hope, partly for that reason, that they are still so weak in the 905 that they can't, they don't have a strong roster of candidates. Not that the Liberals necessarily do either, but then look at the Conservatives. But I do think there is, when it comes to that kind of ground war stuff, the Liberals will still have a better infrastructure, if you like, of members and donors and candidates that will put them ahead in the 905, I suspect. So I don't think the NDP are in a strong position. I don't think the Liberals are in a particularly strong position either. I think cooperating makes all kinds of sense for the sake of making sure we get a government that people actually voted for, rather than one that's based on, on a good day, 40% of the vote. But what I do think is that what's happened federally makes a deal more likely. So, Del Duca said today, and obviously a journalist asked him, would you work with the NDP? And he said, I'm open to anything. Now, that actually is
that's
different from what they've said they would ever have said in the past.
Yeah.
That is a step forward. And previously, it's like, no, we're running to win, end of conversation.
And just to jump off on Del Duca a little bit, that seems to be a bit of part of his branding is the consensus building. Like there was something I covered, like a healthcare call with them on a Zoom press conference or a Zoom call with them and a bunch of healthcare sector leaders, and the NDP was there as well on that one. And he basically owned whatever the Liberals did wrong in their last mandates. And he said, but I want to do better. And I think I can work with these people to do better. And so he's got a major test ahead of him. If he can carry it on, then he becomes premier. But it's variables to me. It's a lot of circumstances that can change between now and June the 2nd.
I certainly hope that if one of the progressive parties ends the election with the most seats, short of majority, I don't care which party it is or what it is, they don't have a majority. I hope there's none of this it's a major minority was the word that Dalton McGuinty used. We're going to govern as if we have a majority, or even though we're 10 seats short. Immediately, openly, pick up the phone to the other progressive parties and start having a conversation and get it done. Hopefully, get it done more quickly than it took the Prime Minister and the leader of the federal NDP. However, credit to its due. I think it's credit where it's due. I think it's great that they have done that. And the good thing about the to my view anyway, is a good thing. And I think the good thing about the deal is that whereas an individual party can go back on its or suddenly find other priorities, the NDP will hold the Liberals to account on particular things, and it's going to be pharmacare, which is going to be the thing that it will succeed or fail on.
Yeah.
And if that is passed, then that's a major step forward in terms of our system.
I think the federal deal might actually end up being a cover for the Liberals to change a leadership change on the Liberal Party, because you're starting like last time you hardly ever heard about, is Trudeau, do we have a successor for Trudeau? Is Trudeau going to leave? And now it's like every 6 weeks, every couple of months, you're hearing a different column. So insiders say this about Prime Minister Trudeau and different things, that he's going to leave, that he won't lead the federal government into the next federal election.
I think you're right, Laura. I think he's got cover now to build some kind of legacy out of his term, and then do what his father did, and then take a walk in the snow,
or we'll walk on the sand.
That works too. That seems more this Trudeau style.
But we'll see what I could be wrong about that. But I think what'll happen is, a name that springs to mind is Chrystia Freeland. She'll take over for him.
Yep.
And then within like 6 months to a year, she'll call another federal election, and that'll be it.
I do want to. I just have like one final thought on this whole thing, and then I think we could kind of wrap this up. But I think that this federal agreement is unique. It's not. We haven't really seen anything like this in Canadian politics in quite some time. I would say probably a couple generations.
Oh, it's Pearson and Tommy Douglas. I think it's the last time anything like this happened.
No, it's actually Robert Borden. In last time we had this kind of this kind of arrangement. My understanding was it was during the First World War.
Right. I mean, I think there was the National Alliance, and then there was cooperation. Tommy Douglas and Pearson, there was clear cooperation over.
My point being though is, we have not seen it like in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I haven't not seen anything like this happen. If this works, if people see, oh my God, Ottawa is doing stuff. It's getting like bills are getting passed, things are getting accomplished. I think the flavor of the public towards this idea is going to be very much positive. And the appetite will be there. It'll be harder for the Liberals and the NDP not to openly say, yeah, we'll do this. If the situation arises, yes, we will do something similar. You don't have to give the details, but just say, yeah, what's happening there, it may happen. Vote how you vote.
I think that's probably a good point to leave it for today, as we come up to the 45-minute line, I think. Thanks so much, Laura Steiner, for joining us again. Really appreciate having you on to give us your insight, and I'm sure we'll speak again in the future again as well. And
I look forward to
exciting. Yeah, it's going to be an exciting few months in Ontario and in Milton too, I think. So I'm pretty sure we'll have some conversations about that before we're done. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.